Thank you so much for joining us today for a little chat. So you are a recent participant on the course. So we want to get your insights, your approach. When we met you first, we were like, this lady knows so much about conflict. So you might tell the people listening in now, just introduce yourself. What is it about your background? And again, what piqued your interest in mediation? So yeah, so I leave it to you.
Okay, thank you for having me. I was thrilled to be asked to be doing this. So yeah, my name is Trine, and I'm Danish by nationality, but I live in Norway. And the reason why I live in Norway is because I work at this place, and it's called the Nansen Center for Peace and Dialogue. And it's to put it into context, it's a knowledge center, but it's, for instance, it's one of seven. So in Norway you have seven what we call peace and human rights centers. We all have different areas of responsibility, and what we do is, uh, as it says in the name of the place, we do dialogue. So we like to say that we build bridges in divided communities. And we like to say that we offer a safe place for dialogue. And often in the context we work, there'll be some sort of divide, be it ethnic, political, national, religious, social, but it can also be on a topic. Like sometimes we do public dialogues, where it's more open to the broader public, or it can be people invited in. And then we do it on a specific issue or a topic that's sensitive or somehow contentious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we say we work, like the work is based on two pillars. So one is that we conduct trainings and seminars and give lectures and workshops on how to facilitate dialogue in a conflict situation. And we've done this a lot in Norway, but also internationally. So we have a project in Chile, one in Afghanistan. We've worked in Iraq, Poland, Germany, Kenya, Colombia. And usually we work with other partners like civil society organizations or universities or municipalities. So we like to work with people who has some sort of platform, who can get the message of dialogue out there, so that it has how do you say, like it spreads.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the one pillar, and then the other pillar is actual facilitation of
Yeah.
conflict and dialogue, where we're invited in as a third party to some sort of conflict. And the way we work is, it's anchored in theory, but it's very much based on experience. It's experience-based knowledge. And a lot of the knowledge is actually knowledge that was worked up over 25 years in the Balkan. So the way this center came to be was that there was a couple of people here in Lillehammer. There was Winter Olympics here in Lillehammer in '94. And this was the same time as there was, ethnic cleansing in the Balkans. So people here invited over people from both sides of the conflict to Lillehammer. And they ended up being here for something like 3 months. And these were people, like there's a story going that some of these people had actually been in the same battle. They had tried literally to kill each other off. And then they came here, they spent some time. And the thing we like to say is that, often in conflict, there's been a process of dehumanization and othering. It's us versus them. We're more human, they're a little less human. They want to kill us off, so we'll kill them off first. And then we like to say that what we do is we create this space for a rehumanization process. So it's both the dialogues, but it's also other activities where you get to know each other and you find out that people have these multiple identities that go beyond, for instance, your ethnicity. So you find out that you're both fathers, or you both like soccer, or you have a shared sense of humor. And in that sense, you come to realize that this other person is just as much human as I. And yeah, it's very cool. Like you humanize each other, and then you can really begin to ask those dialogical open questions and try to understand why other people act the way they do or believe the way they do. And you might even reach a point where you ask yourself, would I have done the same thing if I had been in your shoes or been born into that same context? So yeah, just to come back to your initial question of the mediation and all of this. So, I mean, dialogue and mediation is so very similar. I mean, there are some differences in the sense that in mediation, you're always going to want solutions and preferably an agreement. Whereas the way we work, you don't have to agree, and you don't have to have a solution. The overall aim really is to increase your understanding of the person sitting in front of you. So there's a small difference like that, but then what I really learned at the course I did with Yi was I built up a bit of competence in the dialogical questions, the open-ended questions, and the deep listening. So in that sense, it's really similar, like methodologically speaking, it's very similar, even though the outcome might be a little different, or the aim sometimes is a little bit different. But the craft of it, I feel, is very, very similar.
And that was the thing that you really liked about the course, because we could see that you had certain traits and qualities that go, oh, this lady knows all about, you know, dialogue and peace. And then it was just about mastering that principles of mediation, wasn't it, to kind of
Mm.
help you adapt. And I'm just curious, then you mentioned activities then. So again, there's an overlap here, but the activities then that you have between those people, what might those activities look like? You know, when you're talking about they get commonalities there, what might they look like?
It could be just going for a walk. I mean, we have this thing, walk and talk. You know, you loosen up your body, you get a little bit more comfortable. You don't sit at a table and look each other in the eyes. Perhaps there needs to be a space for that as well, but sometimes it's nice to just walk side by side or in a group
Yeah,
and talk about everyday stuff. And it's in those moments that those other things come up, those other identities where it's not so tied to your political affiliation or your ethnicity or your religion. It becomes more of a normal interaction, you might say.
yeah,
It's less formalized, which can be a really healthy thing for a process like that. It can also be soccer, things that make people laugh, or you know go watch a movie so you have something to talk about, just something to, I think, to lower that tense feeling that sometimes accompany a conflict.
yeah. And the reason I ask this is mediation, sometimes when we train it, it's through the lens of it has to be into the room, get it sorted and move away. And I think the fascinating thing is the more you start talking about conflict and understanding conflict and how to overcome that, then sometimes it's a timing piece, but also how do you set up the conditions to make that dialogue happen.
Mm.
And we had different conversations then in advance of this little video, and you were talking about the different projects that you worked on, and again the learnings there from a cultural point of view, from personality. There was lots of different insights, gender, loads of different things. Can you guide us through some of those projects then, where we really understand conflict in a different way? What are the different considerations?
So there's one thing we're working at right now is a conflict up in northern Norway. There's a river called the Tana River, and it's a border river between Norway and Finland. And basically, I mean, on the surface, the conflict is this. This river is one of the world's most important salmon rivers.
Okay.
And the Norwegian government has now prohibited salmon fishing because of low levels of salmon population. At the same time, this is an area with a lot of Sami people, and the Sami is an ethnic indigenous group in Norway and Finland, and this is part of their tradition and their historic, how do you say, like it's their culture, it's a massive part of their identity. And so and on top of that, there's this massive part of the context is that the Norwegian government for something like 300 years had a policy called Norwegianification. So they were trying to assimilate the Sami people into ethnic Norwegians. And I mean, basically it was a massive human rights abuse in the sense that they tried to eradicate the language, the culture, the traditions, the worldview. Children were taken away from their parents. They were put into Norwegian schools. They weren't allowed to speak their language. And there's never really been a reconciliation process. So this conflict, which on the surface looks like salmon, it has this, it's the iceberg, basically. There's the conflict on the top, but then there is this massive part of this context, which is then the bottom of the iceberg, which makes it really difficult because there is no trust here, and for good reason. I mean, good historic reason. So I suppose the point I was making was that this context, like you were saying, gender, but also history and previous experience can have a massive influence on how, you know, what status is. And the interesting thing about that conflict is as well that there's a conflict line between generations, so young Sami and older generations of Sami, which just adds to the complexity. So, but very interesting.
Yeah.
Difficult, but interesting.
And it's a bit like what we've experienced in Northern Ireland, that, you know, it takes time for this peace and reconciliation process. And, you know, the work is not done, especially as we know in Ireland, there's a lot more work to do. And then you mentioned other projects then. So what are the other projects that your organization's involved in?
We have a collaboration in Afghanistan. So I'll pull out one example. It's Midwives for Peace. So we're working with midwives in Afghanistan, and what we've realized is that midwives have this very privileged position in the sense that they, for instance, they have access, they can travel between places. Like there's an undisputed necessity for midwives, and that gives them a little bit of freedom, if you like. You know, often in Afghanistan, women have to be accompanied, but here there's a little bit more freedom for the midwives. But also they have access to different parts of the population, including militants, people conducting violence.
Yeah.
And so what we try to do is to build up their capacity for dialogue and communication so that they can really, how to say, use that position that they have.
Yeah.
And like we've seen that they've had direct impacts on, for instance, the use of violence. So there's an example going that a woman came in, she was about to give birth. She was unaccompanied, which was unusual. It turns out that her husband was Talib. And the midwives was talking to both the wife and the Talib when he did arrive, and they were asking questions, you know, what's it like? And she was saying, well, there's some areas we can't work there because a rocket came in. And he was like, you know what, I'll spread the word and I'll tell my fellow Talibs to spare that that area. And she was saying after that, basically, there hadn't been any more attacks. So they have this unusual position where they play a role that goes beyond their medical profession.
Yeah.
And we're trying to give them the capacity to make the most out of that, if you like.
Yeah. That's
So
fascinating.
it's very cool. it's yeah, there's some very inspiring people that you come across.
Yeah.
Brave.
Yeah. And that's a bit like mediation, isn't it? Like it takes a certain amount of courage to walk into an uncertain situation or to ask a certain question. And we might do one more project then, and then we might go into, your insights into mediation, and these conflict insights are really fascinating for people watching today. So one more project maybe that your organization might be involved in.
Yeah, I can mention we have something called DEMBRA. It's a national project, but we have a person here who's specifically working with DEMBRA. If you translate it, it's something like well, basically what they do is they work to prevent group hostility and to build up democratic competence. So the context for this project was a few things. Both they found out that, for instance, Jewish pupils in Norwegian schools were still being harassed.
Okay.
And also when this project was in its infancy phase, let's say, there was a terrorist attack here in Norway where a right-wing extremist fella, I don't know if you remember, but he went and he shot something like 77 young people from the Norwegian Labour Party's youth organization on an island. So people who would sort of be representing a liberal view of immigration and diversity. So in the context, this project was developed, and they work with schools to promote democratic values and to bring awareness to group hostility like racism or anti-Semitism or other anti-democratic attitudes. Yeah. And they bring awareness to this the spectrum. Let's say we all have prejudice, but prejudice might evolve into group hostility, which then might evolve into extreme hatred and violence. Yeah. So a lot of the work is it's trying to prevent prejudice from evolving into something severely undemocratic, and also to build up competence to participate and include and positive attitudes towards multiculturalism and democratic values. It's I have a lot of respect for that project. You can go into the DEMBRA website. There's an awful lot of resources. It's really well designed. But that's mostly working up towards schools and teachers, and but it's getting really good feedback. Yeah, so that's just one of the examples. Example.
So that website you mentioned, what would that be? www. what?
DEMBRA.no. So I'm just thinking it could be in Norwegian. I'm not sure if it's been translated, but but that's something to look into.
www.DEMBAR. RA. Okay.
Yeah, DEMBRA.
DEMBRA. Okay. Brilliant. So let's go back to mediation then. So your insights in mediation now, after doing this course, because you have years of experience here beforehand and being in that organization that you've been in, how has mediation helped you or help you understand conflict, or what skills do you think you've developed as a result?
I think for me, the best part. So for instance, what my main responsibility is running courses, but one thing is teaching dialogue, and another thing is practicing dialogue. And I feel like the mediation course just really sort of cemented some routine that I felt like I was lacking, which brings in then a lot more confidence, which brings in more leverage, which makes me just much better at performing in my job, I feel.
Yeah.
So I was pretty grateful for that, to come out of your course and feel like, you know what, I've got this. Like,
Yeah.
not just teaching it onto other people, but actually practicing, which which is something I feel like I need to be able to stand by my own skills in order to feel like I can confidently convey it to other people.
I think it's fascinating where conflict analysis or mediation has so many different applications. And we're going to wrap up shortly now. If you were to give advice to people listening in, so if there are people are students on this course or people who've taken the course already, what advice might you give people watching this now?
Do the course. Definitely do the course. Um, and invest in it, because I feel like with the course you can do as much or as little as you want, but really to dive into it like wholeheartedly, you can come out with so much. And then I suppose reflect on how you can apply it to your own work, but also daily situations. And I also think it's something, I think we have a societal responsibility to let other people know what for instance, how both dialogue and mediation is different to, for instance, debate. Because at least I've grown up in a culture that's very much debatical. Is that a word?
Well, let's make it a word now. How about that?
I mean, we turn on the TV and you have political debates, and you look in the newspaper and it's political debates. What I'm missing is the dialogues, and I mean, especially in this context of Israel and Palestine,
Mm,
I'm really missing the dialogues,
yeah.
and I'm missing that people allow themselves to be moved by other people's story
Mm,
without feeling like it compromises their own story. And I feel like both mediation and dialogue is they're tools that allow for that.
yeah.
It's not a zero-sum game. It's not your story on the cost of mine.
Mm,
It's both stories, and then we can negotiate a common truth or see how they work together.
yeah. And that adversarial approach then where that dialogue comes in, it's very much inclusive as well about understanding each other's perspectives then. And once you understand that, now we know where we are, so at least we
Yeah.
can move forward. So it's more constructive rather than destructive in the adversarial approach.
Mm. Mm.
Trine, this has been a fascinating insight, even for me, hearing you again as you introduce those projects to me. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for the listeners there for and people watching this video.
Thank you.